Hey guys, it's Sam and this is my January wrap-up. And this video is being sponsored by Skillshare. I will be talking about them later on. So January really felt like a bunch of months, a lot of months. I feel like I've been living in January for like years, I don't know. And yet I only read 5 books. I think I had a hard time focusing in January. I don't know what I was doing. Maybe having an existential crisis, I don't know. But 5 books, most of them middle of the road. Let's get into it. So the first book I read was actually a reread and I finished it up because I actually started in December, and that was Traitor's Blade by Sebastian de Castell. This is the first book in the Great Coat series, which is a quartet, I believe, and it's an adult fantasy series that follows these characters that are essentially Three Musketeers-esque. They are former magistrates of the king, but the king some years ago was said to be a traitor and was killed off, and they are now considered traitors as well because they supposedly like betrayed their king. Falkio's our main character, and we get to see sort of how he is now dealing with the world now that a lot of his morals and ideals were sort of turned upside down. How they're all dealing with the world that is very corrupt, wants them dead, and is kind of grim and dark. Not necessarily a full grim dark story, but close. And everything kind of goes from there. Like I said, this is a reread because I do want to read the rest of the series, and this I listened to on audiobook, and I might continue the rest of the series on audio. I think I enjoyed this experience a little bit more on audio because the fight scenes in here are like fairly intricate, almost like choreographed, and they go into explanations for them, but I don't care. But on audio, it works better. The banter works really well on audio. Everyone's voices and things work really well. And I just felt for the characters a little bit more, I'd say. This book does have trigger warnings for mention of rape, death of a loved one, and animal abuse. So overall, like I said, this is a solid start to a series, and I will be continuing this 3.5 stars yet again, just like the first time I read it. I then read A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. This is the first book in a young adult fantasy series that's inspired by West African culture and folklore. I do have a full review for this book, so I'll link that on the screen. There are triggers in here for death of family members, anxiety and panic attacks, hallucinations, self-harm, and possession. This follows 2 main characters. One is Malik, and he is coming to this city right around the time of this great festival that only happens every 50 years, and he gets strung up in a deal to basically kill the crown princess. We also follow the princess, and there's a lot of stuff going on with her politically behind the scenes that no one else knows about, which requires her to have a heart of a king in order to bring someone back from the dead. So she needs one of the champions of this festival to become her king so that she can kill him. And who do you think enters into the festival to get closer to Karina? Malik does. And that is how their paths sort of start to intersect. Like I mentioned, I have a full review to go into a lot of detail about this, but I really enjoyed the world here, the West African folklore, mythology, and culture, and all the foods, and all the clothing, and the creatures, and the deities, and everything else was super fun. Really enjoyed that. I liked our main characters. I think I liked Karina slightly more, but I really liked both of them. What I didn't like so much is that there did start to be sort of this like love thing happening, you know, like romantic interest, and I think this book would have worked just as well without the 2 main characters sort of making moon eyes at each other as soon as they started to cross paths. But otherwise, this was an interesting start to a series that I do think I will continue, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Now let me take a quick break to talk about Skillshare, since like I said, I wasn't doing a lot of reading this month. I was much more interested in other hobbies and interests. And Skillshare is a great platform for that. I'm sure many of you know about Skillshare. It's an online learning community with thousands of different classes to help you explore new skills, new creative hobbies, just new passions. They have classes in illustration, graphic design, art, marketing, productivity, crafts, web development. So if you're in the book space and have a book platform, whether it's like social media or a blog or a website or video, there's a ton of classes on Skillshare that can help you develop those creative skills. One class I plan on taking is portrait photography, shoot and edit Instagram worthy shots by Jessica Kobisi, and this is something I've gotten interested in recently because I've been seeing people talking on TikTok on how they take really beautiful like portrait selfies, which I, as a person who didn't know that people did this, I didn't know. I didn't know that we were beyond just taking a selfie with your phone, and this is stunning. And so, like, I don't really like taking selfies, but this kind of selfie where it's like an artistic thing, so my vibe. I just want like documented evidence of how cool I look in certain outfits, and I think taking portraits like that would be really fantastic. So I plan on learning how to do this so that hopefully by spring, when I can have nice like backdrops and stuff, I can be ready to do this. She teaches you how to plan a shoot, how to shoot in different lighting, how to like style the shoot, all that stuff that I need to learn because I have no idea. And Skillshare is always adding new classes. That's one of their newer classes, so if you do subscribe, you get access to all of those, and it's less than $10 a month for an annual subscription. So if you are interested in cultivating some some new skills while we all still have some downtime, like soaking up a little bit of this hopefully end of some isolation with some new skills so that you're ready, sort of like reignite what you were feeling at the beginning of quarantine last year. The first 1,000 people to click the link down below in the description will get a free trial for a premium membership to explore your creativity. So thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. So next I read some books with very similar themes. The first is The Two Lives of Lydia Bird by Josie Silver. I've also done a full review for this one, so I will link that on the screen. This does have trigger warnings for death of a loved one, and this follows the main character of Lydia, whose fiance Freddie, at the very beginning of the book, passes away in a car accident, and she is reeling from this, so we get to experience her grief with her as she's going through this acute grieving process right after his death. But during this grieving process, while she's sleeping, she actually travels to almost like an alternate reality where Freddie is still alive. So she has her waking life where she is grieving him, and then she gets to get these snapshots of life with Freddie still alive, and we get to follow that whole process and her sort of learning things about their relationship, about her and Freddie, about how she's changing as a person through her grief process, and all of that. So I really enjoyed this. There are so many moments that are a gut punch, but what I really enjoyed is, one, I like grief stories. I do kind of, not enjoy because that's the wrong word, but I do find stories about people who have lost their romantic partners very compelling. For some reason, I think it's because it's a really big fear of mine that I'm going to meet the love of my life and then they're going to die. So I like live through this trauma with people to be like, no, they get through it, because I think I somehow fear this hypothetical situation. But we get to experience all this with her. We get to see her grow as a person. It gives me P.S. I Love You vibes, that movie, without actually it being that similar to that movie. We get to see her and Freddie's relationship, and we get to like really believe it, but also get to see how it was more flawed than somebody would maybe think when they're grieving and like sort of idealizing everything, and I did really enjoy it. I did find though that it started to meander. Originally this was going to be like a 4 or 5 star read for me, and then it started to meander like towards the end, and it went a couple different directions that just like threw me off, because I was expecting one thing and then that didn't happen, and then it kind of came around and like did happen, and it just kind of like messed with me a bit. So I really like Josie Silver's books, and they are very polarizing, so I would encourage you to listen to my full review where I go into this. But ultimately that meandering thing that it did, while it made sense for her grief journey, just kind of lost me a little bit as a reader following a plot, and I ended up giving this 3.75 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Float Plan by Trish Dollar. This also features death of a loved one, but this time by suicide, and there is some graphic depictions of suicide here, so be careful if that is a trigger for you. We do have a suicide note as well as descriptions of what this person did and how they were found, because this woman did find his body. And this is another dead fiance situation. I was just reading that this month. But in this one, we are following her about a year, a little less than a year maybe, after his passing, and this was again her fiance. They were going to go on this sailing trip, and they have this boat, and the boat was left to her when he passed, and so she ends up taking the boat on the sailing trip, but doesn't really know how to sail, so very soon has to hire sort of a crewmate to help her sail, and along comes Aiden, and he is a sailor that's been doing it for a long time, but is struggling now because he had his leg amputated from an accident. So from the knee down on one leg, he has a prosthetic limb, and while that doesn't affect him actually being able to do his job and sail and everything, a lot of people like that he knew in the business will no longer hire him because they consider him like a liability, and so he is struggling as well because sailing is like his whole life, and so they end up sailing together, and it's just a beautiful, sweet journey of these two people who come together at like the best sort of time. She's grieving but getting over that a bit, or like not getting over, but like moving on to a new chapter in her life, and they start to form this friendship and then deeper bond, and you can really see that through them traveling together. And he is just a very sweet man. He's Irish as well, so he's an Irish sailor. He's just very sweet, and it was just like a nice read if you enjoy any of these kind of travel stories and like finding yourself again stories. I did do a full review for this, but not on the channel. In the bibliothecary community, for certain tier levels, I do audio reviews, like almost like podcasts, for every single book I read that doesn't get a video. So if you want me to talk about books to you, like every single book that I read, I will link that on the screen for you to check out, as well as all the additional perks that they get as well. So I also enjoyed this one, although there was a little bit of a hiccup towards the end of this one with just like miscommunication things that like didn't quite make sense pacing wise. The rest of the story made sense pacing wise, but this part didn't. So other than that, I really enjoyed this. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. And finally, we have Legend Born by by Tracy Dion. This is a book I've been talking about a lot recently. I just did a video review for this, and we also just did our House Salt Book Club live show discussion for this. This is the first book in a YA fantasy series that follows our main character of Bree, and she is going to early college basically, so it's for people that are like 16, 17 that can go to college early and take some like early college credits and things. And so she gets into this school with one of her best friends and goes to the school, and while she's there she realizes that there's a magical secret society that she kind of ends up getting pulled into, because right before she left for early college her mother passed away tragically in a car accident, and she starts realizing that there might be some things with this magical society that had to do with her mother's death. And everything kind of goes from there. So there are trigger warnings in here for death of a parent, generational trauma, so depictions of slavery, abuse, rape. There's gore, possession, demons. I've been gushing about this a lot, so I don't want to go into it too much in this video, but this was fantastic. This is a urban fantasy series, so it takes place modern day, but we have this wonderful mashup of Arthurian legend and magic with this magical secret society. And then we have also some things with Bree's ancestry and her particular magic that she starts discovering is a thing. And in addition to all of this with like magical creatures and different kinds of magic and all of that, we also have really great explorations of different themes of generational trauma and racism and certain people that are not allowed to be in certain spaces. Like when we talk about these magical societies, how a lot of times they are like white upper class societies, and also the privilege of knowing your history like many people in the diaspora don't. And all of these things are meshed together so well and so beautifully, in addition to some really great characters. Bree is a fantastic character. There are two side characters who are like sort of eventually evolving into sort of love interests, but in a way that is really well done because they're all so connected, so it doesn't feel like your typical YA love triangle. This book, when you first start reading it, feels like it could go the direction of just like your typical YA that you've seen before, and it really isn't. So like I said, I've talked about this more at length recently, so I'll link those videos on the screen for you to check out, but highly enjoyed this one. One of the most promising debuts I've read in a very long time, and one of the most promising YA series that I've started in a very long time. Like, I'm actively looking forward to the next book in the series, and likely will not forget about it like some of my other series that I tend to do that with. And I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. So that is it for the books that I read in January. Comment down below and let me know how your reading month went. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!